That was part of the con. Let me get this fault away from everybody else and start to seduce her. Cognitive dissonance keeps you paralyzed because is he good, is he bad? Am I crazy, is he crazy? Is the relationship toxic or healthy?
If you ever look back and you think, how did I not see this, right? Not one red flag, not two, the whole thing. How did you not see what this person was doing to you? And the answer is typically not that you just missed it. I think that it's designed to be missed. Abusers can be con artists. Abusers don't just lie, right? They build this whole life and it feels so real while they're lying. It's not confusion, it's a setup completely. And so by the time you notice that something's changing, something's shifting, you're in love, you might be trauma bonded. It's too late. It feels too late. And that's the part that I really want to talk about today, this con that has been run on you. So my guest today is Dr. Nadine Macaluso. She's a therapist, a trauma bond expert, and the author of Run Like Hell, which is a phenomenal book that I really want people to run to the store to go get. So Nadine, can you just describe yourself a little bit? Let's talk about your background and who you are.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on here. And so, yes, I'm a licensed therapist and I have my PhD in somatic psychology, but many, many moons ago, I was just a young girl hoping to fall in love. And I did fall in love, or at least I thought I did. But actually, I entered into the quintessential trauma bond with my ex-husband, the Wolf of Wall Street. And it was not the fairy tale I thought it was going to be. In fact, it ended up being a living hell. And it was just absolutely horrible on so many different levels. I got two gorgeous kids out of it, so that's wonderful. But while I was in it throughout my whole 20s, it was very terrorizing and very traumatizing. And so I went back to school, didn't know this was going to be my specialty. Should have been obvious. He wrote a book and made a movie while I was in school about our Greek tragedy of a life. And now I help women everywhere, like you do, recognize, escape, and heal from intimate partner violence.
Yeah. I love that you've turned it into something, I think it's amazing. So many people are like, I should write a book. My story could make a movie. And you're like, mine did. This was a huge blockbuster. And I know not all the details were totally accurate. It wasn't told from your perspective, certainly, but it was wild enough that it made a blockbuster hit.
It was. And a lot of it, the movie shows his shenanigans, his drug addiction, his sexual boundarylessness, his just grandiosity, his larger than life persona. And that really was the way he lived. And that is what I fell in love with for a while.
It makes so much sense, and I think in hindsight, you probably see the con. And that's kind of how I want to walk through this episode. I think when people can see the structure of how this happened, it's helpful to unpack what you've been through and also feel like you're doing something to kind of prevent what may happen in the future. I always tell women who are interested in dating, because not all want to date again, but slow down, how you can kind of slow down and see things. So when we kind of take a step back and we look at this setup, I think that most women don't really realize how early it starts. Like he's watching how you respond and learning what matters to you. And he figures out kind of how to become that. And it feels like chemistry, but what do you think it is? Like, what are they picking up on early on that we're not seeing?
I think it's actually paradoxical. I think that first of all, they do fall for very strong, bright, competent women who have a lot of capacity. Because when you think about it, this pathological predator is very dark. And they're not telling you that, but they know that. And so they need someone that's going to present to the world. They need a good beard. And if you're a high-functioning woman with a lot of capacity, a lot of tolerance, I was also very young, you become a good trophy partner, right? And they're able to present this image to the world because you're fitting into that. Then on the other side, also, they might look for a vulnerability that you have. Maybe you've just gotten divorced. Maybe you've lost a parent. Maybe you've just moved to a new city and there's a vulnerability in your life that's making you, like we all do when we are in vulnerabilities, not feel as strong as you usually feel. And so I think it's paradoxical that they look for both things.
Yeah, they really do. It's interesting. I know a lot of people who haven't been through it, I would think, are saying that victims are weak and they're stupid for not getting it. But it's like, what's going on in the beginning and how much they mirror you and learn about you and really study you and give you all the things. And they're looking for certain traits in you, which, studies show that we have agreeableness and loyalty and conscientiousness and empathy. These are great qualities. We don't want to not have them, but we need to know that those also can make us vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when you're in a healthy relationship, those qualities of loyalty and tolerance and compliance and collaboration are beautiful, right? But in the hands of a con artist, they're going to get weaponized and used against you to the highest degree.
You're absolutely right. Now, do you think that these guys are running cons, like they enter the relationship and they know, like, okay, I'm going to con her, I know how to get her? Or are they like repeating patterns that work? How conscious is this?
I think they know who they are. They know who they are. They don't want us to be all of them because we wouldn't stay. So if I can talk about my own personal experience, I think it was very intentional because he paid somebody $15,000 or made them $15,000 in the stock market to get me to go on a date with him and this friend. So I had no idea that this was a setup because it was like a mutual acquaintance. It wasn't a best friend. So she kept calling me to go to dinner with her. And I was like, okay, why? And then she said, oh, this guy, Jordan's going to come. And I was like, isn't he married? She said, what do you care? I said, I don't care. I just think it's very strange. At 22, you're like, why is a married man coming to meet me for dinner with a friend? So he had orchestrated that whole thing that I had no idea about. And that's so Machiavellian. And that's just so telling. That was part of the con. Let me get this girl away from everybody else and start to seduce her. And I had no idea.
Wow. And you find out later, of course. That's always the hindsight piece, right? Hindsight's 2020. If only we had it at the beginning. But
why else would you send somebody $2,000 worth of flowers? You want to win them over. You want to just wow them to the point that the con artist becomes irresistible.
Yes.
It's not like that every person, not everybody's as grandiose as the Wolf of Wall Street. I understand that. But it doesn't even have to be gifts. It could be constant texts, constant attention, wanting to FaceTime all the time.
Yeah, the way that they build that connection is unbelievable. Like the information gathering that's happening in the beginning of these relationships. I always feel like, I don't know, you're wearing like a University of California sweatshirt and it's like, oh yeah, I grew up in California. He probably didn't. The things that they will say to build connection and chemistry, or like, you took a vacation in Hawaii and he's like, I've always wanted to go there. No, he didn't. He can just say anything. We don't feel the need for so much proof in the beginning. I know I trusted my ex right off the bat. And when I realize how I look back at sort of how that happened, what made me trust him, he told me he was honest. So I trusted him. In hindsight, like on what planet does that make sense? But I didn't really have any other evidence. But at the time, it felt like I knew I could trust him. Meanwhile, I absolutely should never have trusted him.
Right. And, they say things like you're saying, they mirror you, of course, to show that you have similar interests. But also, I'll give you an example of something. They say things that make you think you can trust them. Well, first of all, trust has to be earned, and we have blind trust, right? So now we know trust has to be earned. But if we are a person that is very trustworthy, we project that positive quality onto them, especially if you've never met anybody like this. But as we see in The Wolf of Wall Street, he's a severe addict. And this sticks out. 30 years later, I'll never forget when I first met him. He told me he was at a family gathering for Thanksgiving and how his ex-wife's sister was rolling around on the floor drunk, and he couldn't believe how disgusting it was. Okay, so this guy who we see in the movie is rolling around on the floor all the time, right? But he puts that little seed into my head, implying I would never be like that.
Right.
It's so wild when I think back in retrospect. And I think anybody that says to you, to your point, you can trust me. I don't go around saying that to people. Do you?
Absolutely never. And
Right.
actually, in the book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, I know there's this part early on, I want to say it's chapter 1, where he's describing a story. And in that story, the victim is saying the perpetrator or the person who later perpetrated her said, "Trust me." He like tapped his watch and he went, "Trust me." And it's like, that is a moment where actually something went off in her when she looked back and she was like, who says that? I don't like people who say, "Trust me." Like, where's the proof? I don't have to trust you, relax, build the trust. So it is so interesting that he showed this like disgust for her behavior that he engaged in. Mine would slam his dad all the time for cheating on his mom. Like that was something early on. He was like, my dad cheats on my mom and I find it disgusting. My dad's a bad person. I can't believe he would do that. This guy's a serial cheater, just like his dad. In fact, like it's crazy. But you think it's so real.
Yeah. And there's all these vulnerability dumps, right? You're the only one that I know that I'm telling this to. And, in a lot of instances, this wasn't my experience, but, we're going to build a life together. We're going to get a house together. When we move in that house, I'm going to build you a shed so you can paint, right? And so the imagination just starts building this story of what life is going to look like with this person. And so, of course, the person gets really excited by it. And then you combine that with all the dopamine and the oxytocin and the great sex. Why would you just think, oh, this person's just lying to seduce me? Normal people don't think like that.
No. I always feel like these are like the monsters in the closet that we talk about as if they're these very rare circumstances. They're not everywhere. It's the monsters, and it's not real. They're everywhere and they're not in our closets. They're in our beds. These are people who are relatively strategic. A con is somewhat knowing. I realize they're not all masterminds, and of course some are not so specific, but there is a real con in the love bombing. And this is the hook, what you're describing, the mirroring, the future faking, and this like fast emotional closeness. And they say, trust me, and they make you feel, like chosen and seen and special, different, all these things. And then people tell you once they turn bad, you should have known. How? How is that even possible? Because they don't actually build trust over time. They create the feeling of trust fast. They can mimic it really fast. Many people say that they trusted their abusers. It sounds like you and I had the exact same experience.
Right away. And if you think about it, we're all built for attachment, love, and connection. And so we know that attachment more than food is what allows a baby to develop, right? So we are biologically programmed for attachment. We want to connect with people. We want to love. We want to share our lives. And so they weaponize that very basic innate need because they know that we have that. And you can't survive without it. So, they're literally weaponizing what it means to be human, which is to love and connect. And so it's just so devastating when you finally realize, and I didn't even realize any of this, once I left, even years after I left, even when I was in school, nobody taught me about this. I really didn't start to realize this until I started to write my book in like 2019. So it took me years, 5 years of school, one domestic violence class adjunct.
Wow.
So everything in my book was around research.
It's unbelievable, I think, after the fact, when you sort of unpack it, it is shocking. And I something that our brains do, right, is we look back and we think, how could I not have known? Because you're using all the information you have now to look back, and then it makes you feel stupid. But like, I just don't think that people can know then what they know now. It's so you can't hold yourself accountable for stuff you didn't know and you couldn't have known when it was happening. It felt like love. They're really good at mimicking that.
Right. And so many women do blame themselves. Well, the perpetrator blames them. Society blames them. Right. And so this is wonderful why we're having these conversations to actually know the facts of what to look for.
When you're in it, it is so hard to question. You already have the trust, love, dependency. You're getting everything. It's like you've been handed all of your dreams on a silver platter by this wonderful man, and it feels good. So you're not going to question it. What happens next, of course, is this switch, things all of a sudden stop matching and maybe, I don't know, he pulls back or starts to become inconsistent or contradicting who you thought he was. Why don't people notice it at that point in the con?
Yeah. So, this can happen very quickly where the mask falls, where the persona, I like to call them Romeo, that they've been portraying to seduce you in or love con you in starts to slip. And usually it's because you've gotten engaged, they've moved you in. I got engaged within 6 months and married 6 months later, right? They've moved you in, you've become financially dependent on them. And then what happens is that they can betray you, right? And then they'll gaslight you saying, of course, they didn't cheat, but they start to behave totally differently. And your brain, they're cruel. They start to be controlling. My ex got very possessive and jealous, isolated me, moved me out to Long Island away from everybody in this big house, which again, theoretically looks great. But I was 23 years old and I didn't want to be in a big house in the suburbs, right? And so the mask starts to fall and you start to see this person that you don't really recognize, and you're trying to reconcile the brain. And that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in, which is the mental confusion you feel from trying to hold two personas of Dirty John and Romeo. And so cognitive dissonance keeps you paralyzed because is he good? Is he bad? Am I crazy? Is he crazy? Is the relationship toxic or healthy? And now you're just swirling and you're embarrassed.
Oh man, the embarrassment, and the not telling people. And I think this coupled with the fact that you hear so often people say, don't slander your partner to other people and don't spread your business around. So we don't. And then you don't have anybody to sort of bounce that off of. People always say, go to a therapist. And I'm like, women don't know that it's abuse. So then they don't seek out therapy. They seek out maybe a friend. And usually friends and family say things like, are you sure he didn't mean it? Or I think well-intentioned for the most part. I don't think people are trying to keep you in bad situations, but they're just sort of trying to give you another perspective. But all of these mixed messages, it's just confusing. So even when there is a switch, you're so right with the gaslighting and the cognitive dissonance. It's like, they don't just switch. The light doesn't just flip on and okay, now he's awful all the time. So now you can clearly see it. The oscillation of kindness and cruelty is there. The confusion is there. The fact that you wonder, is it me? Am I toxic? Does he need therapy? Does he need help? Instead of, and especially when you have someone like what you were dealing with huge addiction issues, it's like, you're not supposed to leave somebody who's sick. You're supposed to help them.
You're supposed to help them. And remember, okay, the mask falls and he's cruel, controlling, coercive, but you're hopeful. Hope is the hope that Romeo is going to come back, and he'll come back just enough to give you like, oh, there he is. That was just a moment. We're going to figure this out. And you really believe that. And it keeps happening time and time again. And because you don't tell anybody and you're so biochemically addicted to him, to the highs of the dopamine and oxytocin, when he does berate you or decimate you, or my ex was a rageaholic, I would feel so broken and shattered. I couldn't tell anybody because they're just like, here you go again. And then all he would have to do is come back and I would feel such relief.
Right.
He was the only one who could soothe me after a certain point.
Yeah. The dopamine, like that. People don't realize that relief when they're not abusive anymore. And I mean, that obviously is temporary, but the moments where they sort of come back and, it's different for everyone. You get a gift, you get a trip, you get love, you get not being ignored. It could be anything.
That's right. It could be anything, because a lot of them do withdraw and get the silent treatment too, right? Depends on the type of person that they are. And you just get a little bit and then you're like, oh, there's the guy. But usually you're just spending the whole time walking on eggshells and just trying to figure out like, what the hell happened to me?
Right. And that's,
scary.
It is scary. I don't know how to answer that question, like what happened to us? It's like, I can answer it clinically, but when you really think about your own life, it's like, you still kind of go, how did I let this happen? But I really want to reinforce that concept that we didn't let this happen. You don't know you're in a con when you're in it. And I think if anything, this oscillation of abuse and cruelty and kindness and all of the mixture of things and cognitive dissonance, it creates almost obsession, desperation. What's your experience?
You can start to get obsessive thoughts because just like an addiction, you're craving the high, the dopamine and the oxytocin. And so, yeah, you're craving that. And we know also you get low serotonin too when you're in love, which causes obsessive thoughts. So there's a whole biological cocktail that's going on that most people aren't even aware of. And what happens to the victim is she starts to blame herself and starts to get really reflective. And it's like, if I do this, it'll change. If I do this, it'll change. I used to say that I used to think if I hang upside down by my toenails and vomit, green vomit upside down, he'll change.
I don't think there's anything we can do.
I didn't cause his addiction. I didn't cause his manipulations and betrayals. But yet we feel, especially if we're highly competent, we're somewhat confident, capable people, we're like, if I change, this will change.
Right.
And that's illusion.
I think it's one of the, I say best, I really mean worst, but like one of the best parts of the con is that they convince you that you're the problem and now you're managing his behavior and his moods and thinking that you're the problem. So the whole time you're focused on what you can do better and differently. Like I know for me, I was constantly told that I wasn't supportive and that I didn't do anything. And it was so crazy to me because I was doing everything, not supportive. Like, what do you want? My arm? I'm giving money, I'm giving time, energy, love, effort. I'm swallowing all of my own ego, everything. I'm just literally living for someone else, all to be told I'm not doing enough.
Yeah, but you have to lose your identity to keep the couple's identity. And that's what they want. They want power and control over us. So they're purposely undermining us, blaming us, disparaging us, insulting us, intimidating, dominating us so that we fear them. And then they have total control. And part of that control is you're the problem.
Right. I rarely talk to someone who hasn't been through that part where they wonder if they're the problem. I never wondered if I was a narcissist. That word wasn't even in my realm at all. But every time he would try to get me to believe that I was the problem, I would be like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand what I could have done differently. I was trying to see myself as the problem and I just couldn't. So, and I know some women absolutely see themselves as the problem, but I was confused by that. I didn't think I was perfect, but how could I be causing this?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think I was the problem because I knew he was difficult, but I did believe, and this is my own grandiosity, right, that my behavior could change him, right? There was that belief at that young age that I can do this. I can take him on. I can fix him. It's me and him against the world. Meanwhile, I'm dealing with like a master manipulator who's a master of the universe. And I was no match for him.
I know. I hate to admit that, but yeah, it's like whenever I have referred to abusers as con artists, there are people that push that back and they feel like, no, mine's not smart enough. That's not possible. He's not a mastermind. He's an idiot. My ex is an idiot. I mean, yours is not, I don't think, but mine is an idiot. You don't have to be smart. What you see here is men on a scale. Some are professionals and millionaires, and some are just regular blue collar guys, and everything in between. It's not, people need to not focus on their intelligence as much as patterns that repeat themselves. And the fact that you and I have very different stories and yet not that different.
That's right. That's right. And if you look at it just very simply, and I say this all the time, this person, no matter their intelligence level, their socioeconomic status, their race, they will use, harm, exploit, and betray you and anyone to get their needs met for money, power, pleasure, and status. And that's just it. And if you're the object they're going to use or you're the tool on the tool belt, that's who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't see people as human, the way I see, especially actual narcissists, but they just don't see you as human. You're a tool. You're a resource. The lack of object relations is astounding. When you start learning about that, it's like, wow, you were just a tool. And that is difficult for some people. I know there's this kind of, did he love you? Did he not love you question? And some women, I think, cannot believe that he didn't love you. And maybe there's this belief of like he loved you in his own way, but it wasn't enough for you. I had to get myself to a place where I was like, no, that was never love. He never loved me. He loved himself and he loved how he made me see him, loved what I did for him, but he didn't love me. He didn't even know me.
Well, there's no respect. There's no care. There's no trust. They don't give you the space to be who you are. They're not invested in your personal growth. Those are things that define love. None of that's there. Could they be obsessed with you? Could they be possessive over you? Sure. But again, that's not love.
No. It can feel like, I guess the possession part, obviously looking back at it, that's not love. But when you're in it, it's like, he's jealous. He cares about you. He feels like you're his. I don't know if there's a connection there to like the sense of belonging that people need. You feel like you belong to the relationship. You belong to someone. They love you, but he's controlling you. That's why all these tactics are so important, like coercive control and the gaslighting. And you have to see how all of these things interplay together to create this masterful con that is natural, or it's learned, right? It's not like they're natural masterminds, but it's learned behavior. They know what works. That's why they do it. So you don't have to be smart. You just have to know, like, you do A and B is the result. So you just repeat that because it gets you control.
Right. And, people say, well, like we talked about in the beginning, do they know they're doing it? And another reason why I think they do, they act totally different in front of certain people.
Right.
I've seen them turn it on and off. So they can control themselves.
They absolutely can.
So that tells me that they know. Because if they're subduing their behavior or changing their behavior in front of other people, that means they can control it. And that means they know what they're doing.
And I see that now. I so see that now. I think when we're in it, it reinforces the idea that you're the problem because he's different around you and he's different around other people. So other people get the real him and you're getting this terrible version. You must be causing it. And I'm like, flip that. You're actually getting the real him, the mean version of him. Other people are getting the facade, especially, again, when they're an actual narcissist, because boy, do they care about their image. They want to be seen as good and great and amazing and smart and all the things so that they can run the con on you. And it's actually a little ironic because we get blamed for having been lied to, right? You're dumb, Dr. Nay. You got lied to. Everybody got lied to. We're not the only ones.
Everybody got lied.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
We're not dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody fell for it because if they didn't see it, unless you had somebody in your life that right from the get-go, from the jump was like, Jordan's terrible. He's a con artist right from the beginning. Everyone fell for it. That's how I see it. So
that's why is, are so powerful. And he ran a whole entire huge company of people who were following him. And even my mother tried to warn me on some level. One of my friends did, but I wasn't open to hearing that at all. I just was like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't see him the way I see him. But yeah, people even tried, not many, because mostly he controlled everybody that was around us. But sure, people did. But I wasn't open to hearing it.
I wasn't either. And I didn't have anybody from his past telling me like, hey, watch out. I only had people in his present that were like, he's such a great guy. And it's interesting because I was talking to the new, well, I guess it's the ex now, but the new supply of my ex. And she had all of the knowledge, right? Like she saw my videos and knew what I thought, but had branded me a liar because of what he said. And I find it so interesting that I had no information. Technically, she had all the information and we both got conned. And I don't think I'm smarter than her or that she's smarter than me. I think, if I'm dumb, she's dumb. We're all dumb, but we're not. Like we all fall for it. There's a million reasons why, even if it's happening right in your face, we find ways to rationalize. Like that cognitive dissonance is not something people can go, well, aside from that, that's a huge part of why we don't see it and why we stay stuck in paralysis.
And also, even for anybody who's listening to this, I've witnessed this a lot. We don't want to see it. I mean, once we come to that realization, our whole world crashes. Everything we believed in, everything we thought we were in, if we've bought a house with them, if we've had children with them, it's a horrible realization to come to. And so I offer, so much compassion. I see it in my community, women that are like pissed that they're learning it. They don't want to accept it. And you just have to hold them so gently and just say, all you have to do is breathe, listen, and when you're really ready to take it in, you take it in. Don't force yourself to recognize this if she wasn't ready.
You have to be ready. I speak to women at all different stages, the ones that have I'm joking, of course, but like have their PhDs in narcissistic abuse from YouTube University. You know everything now, but that's all hindsight. When you're in it, you just don't know. And sometimes you're not ready to face the
Yes.
really harsh, tough reality that he doesn't love you and this is not real to him. I think it's real to us, certainly. I don't want to discount people's feelings, of course, but it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very hard realization to come to.
Yeah.
So if you're resisting this, that's okay.
It makes sense that people do that. You want to believe that this person can change. Those last bits of hope, those little threads we're like holding on to so tight of, are you sure he can't change? Or he really says he wants to, and like all the promises that they make, but you feel like you're losing something good instead of escaping abuse or escaping a bad relationship. Like when these relationships end, whether he leaves you or you leave him, it feels like dying.
Yeah. And then you have to deal with the grief.
Yeah. It's one of the hardest parts, I think, the grief piece. Now, let's kind of shift into what is his payoff? Like what are these guys actually getting? Everybody says power and control. Obviously, that is an absolute fact. What else are they getting from running these cons?
Well, I mean, if I think about my own personal situation, as I said, he got a great beard, right? I would show up, do great dinner parties for him, behave relatively normal while, he was wasted. So it really reinforced this facade that he was the king, right? And also sexual servitude, right? They get sex on demand. I mean, they get a lot of things because usually we're doing everything for them. And they are getting their needs met on so many different levels. And so why would they stop? They're getting what they want sexually, emotionally, physically. If you're a good housekeeper, if you're great with the kids, all of these things that, we basically become an employee. Well, that's how I felt, at least.
Yeah, me too.
Just making always okay. I mean, he was so nuts, my ex. He had like a thing with his hair. And he had to have a certain brush, like a goodie brush from like CVS. And I mean, if he didn't have that brush, he would go nuts. Finally, for Christmas, I got him like 20 and put gold all over them, because it's like he had to have what he wanted when he wanted. And I made sure that happened.
I'm sure there were consequences if you didn't.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to get the rage over a brush.
Right? It's something so small, but in the moment, I know, like I would have done the same thing. I honestly, like the things I've done, we never want to look back to the things that we've done sometimes. But I had I think it was in a video that I saw, this realization that I know that men benefit from relationships with women. And I think one of the biggest cons of our time, not even our time, like I'm talking centuries, is that women are the ones who benefit from marriage and even divorce. Women are not benefiting from any of these things. Women are not in any capacity, but it's sold to us. It's marketed to us. So we want the wedding, we want the marriage, and it benefits them. So when people are like, but what about in an abusive relationship? Like he acts like he hates me. He's so mean all the time. He's so angry all the time. He still benefits. Even abusers, even any man in a bad relationship is still benefiting. That's why even just your average crappy man, not necessarily abusive, doesn't leave his wife. These men are not the ones initiating divorce because it's work to actually do that, but it's deeper than that. People act like he just doesn't want to do paperwork. That's not the only reason. The actual relationship benefits him. He gets all of the things we just talked about. He wants all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if, they're sex addicts and they're just leading a whole separate life on the side, but then they have the wife and the kids, because people say, well, then why do they get married? For the very reasons that the facade, the servitude, physical, emotional, sexual servitude, they get a lot.
Yeah.
And so you're right, they don't usually leave. And then when the women leave, which I have many women who are in this 30, 35, 40 years, one woman 47 who finally left, then they experience post-separation abuse. So men are so mad that they got away.
Yeah. All of this, it's brutal how we find ourselves organizing our entire lives around them. And then in post-separation, it's hard to shut that off even when you see it. But a man
Yeah.
like this, like his mission is to secure access to what he wants, which is power, control, access to you, sex, all the things. And she thinks she's in love. But we see now, after the fact, of course, how he benefits from all of this. I think the one piece that's still deeply disturbing, shocking to most women is, but why does he want those things? Like, why do you want to control someone? That's still, even if you can get to a place where you go, fine, it was control, but why? Why would somebody want that? What do you say?
It doesn't really matter the why, because we could say attachment issues, personality disorders, substance abuse, compulsive process disorder. There's so many reasons why they want that. But I mean, first of all, they feel entitled to it. They don't usually have a moral compass. I mean, we live in a patriarchy, but it doesn't even matter why, because it's just wrong. And if you spend all your time like trying to figure out why, go back to school. Like you say, people have to get like degrees in narcissism from YouTube. And, once you understand the basics of who this person is, and I understand the need to go down the rabbit hole for sure to make sense of it. But I could say, Jordan had a very rageful father, right? And maybe he didn't feel loved by his mother. My mom was raised by a schizophrenic and a father who was an alcoholic and used to beat her with wire hangers. She didn't then, abuse people, right? So enough of this people hurt people. Sure, they do. But a lot of hurt people get help. But these men feel entitled to just behave however they want. They feel entitled to have power and control over us, and they don't have a moral compass. And often they really think they're superior.
You're right. I think what's really interesting too, though, is how they get away with it. They're running this con. We're not seeing it because we're too invested, too in love, too deep in it. We can't see 6 inches from our own faces when we're in this type of relationship. But I think
Right.
I find it fascinating how they get away with it. But I really love your answer of sort of like, it doesn't matter why they want this. I agree. I think studying it like well out after you're healing, and maybe then it becomes interesting. I found it really interesting, but when you're in it, it's a detriment almost to focus on
Yeah.
how and why and all the things. But plausible deniability is something that I see so often of like, everything is not, I didn't quite say that. I didn't promise. I just said that maybe, or it wasn't me, or all the things that they use, like plausible deniability, the subtlety of some of the abuse, the covertness of it, like nothing really feels bad enough. And it's the
Right.
way that they can get you to tolerate more and more, because there are men that like have multiple affairs that beat their wives and it's not enough to leave because he's got you to tolerate worse and worse behavior the entire time.
Yeah, no, it's that's why we're sitting here talking, because it's really one of the most painful experiences of relational trauma.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it's just explaining it to other people is brutal, which I think in the last few years, the fact that this is talked about more, I hope, not only do I hope that it helps women get out and women heal who've been in it, I hope it makes the younger women, the 20-somethings, the you and me's from 20 years ago, to hear things like this and go, ooh, okay, I know what to avoid now. I know what not to do. Not that we're perfect at protecting ourselves, you can't really, there's no perfect defense. But I think knowing that men like this exist in the world and that there are people out there that will just hurt you for no reason, you didn't have to do anything to them, it's not you. Just knowing that they exist is enough.
Yeah, and I find the 20-year-olds a little resistant to it. And I understand that, because they want to believe in the myth of romantic love that we've been sold. And so sometimes they're not ready to hear it. And I understand that too. But trust me when I tell you, listen, it'll save you so much severe life consequences.
I totally agree. In fact, referencing that conversation I had with the ex new supply, she was 27 when she met him. And she has said to me, like, I don't know what to tell you. I was young, dumb, and stupid. Like I didn't know that men could be like this. And it's like, well, I mean, I learned the hard way too. So again, it's not like, say, I told you. It's like, I get it. Because to be truthful, I was 27 when I met him. So I get it.
Right,
It makes sense.
right. Experience, though, is the greatest teacher. But if you can listen to this and look for the red flags and really pay attention, you won't move in with this person, get married, have a baby with that, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's so true. I think when you look at all of this together, like the setup, the hook, the switch, the conditioning, and what he's benefiting, what's his payoff. When you look at this, it doesn't feel like some random, like, how did this happen? You start to go, oh, I can see how all the pieces fit together. And this is something that works on intelligent, smart, strong women. So for people that might be listening and thinking like, God, this is exactly what I went through. That's kind of the point, right? This is the con. You fell for it. I fell for it. We all have maybe fallen for it. And we didn't imagine what happened. You weren't crazy while you were going through it. We can start to see things differently now. And that matters.
It does matter. It does matter because if you can start to heal and rebuild your life.
God, that's so true. Yeah. It's not just a bad relationship. It is a system that worked until you saw it. You got conned, but it happens. And what we do now is heal and focus on ourselves. And in all fairness, like dismantle the patriarchy, like get decenter men, focus on ourselves, love ourselves, be in community with other women. And you have an amazing community for survivors. Do you want to tell us about that?
I started a year ago and I really didn't know what to expect because I hadn't done it before. And so it's a community of a few hundred women where we run 4 support groups a week. Once a week, I teach a lesson. Yesterday was sexual and financial coercion, which they love. Then I have experts such as you come in and talk once a week. And now it's a year, so I really see people growing and changing. But the most beautiful thing is watching the other women support each other and validate each other and have each other's back. And there's a healing that happens in community that it can't really happen one-to-one. One-to-one is super important. And I think that's, therapy or coaches, however you want to work it, is great. But having sisters validate you, see you, make you think you're not crazy and support you when you get the craving to go back, when you're feeling just totally insecure and full of self-doubt, the validation they are amazing.
It is. There's something about being witnessed in community with other women. So people should check out your group, but also check out your book, Run Like Hell, if you haven't already. It was such a great read, really well written, such great information in there. So grab that book. And Dr. Nay, thank you so much for being here. And it's an incredible thing to watch, even women like us just turn this into something and heal. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, always enjoy our conversations, Lisa.